the binary suns of Kepler 440 to cast long shadows across the crystalline wasteland. As Zephyr Kane adjusted his environmental suit's filtration system, the air here tasted of copper and ozone, a metallic tang that reminded him why most sane people avoided the Outer Rim territories. But sanity had never been his strong suit, and the Outer Rim was where the real treasures lay buried beneath centuries of cosmic dust and forgotten wars. His scanner chirped softly, detecting traces of rare earth minerals beneath the formation of what looked like naturally occurring crystal spires, natural, except for the perfect geometric patterns that suggested otherwise. Zephyr had learned to trust his instincts over his instruments, and right now his instincts were screaming that this was anything but natural. He approached the largest spire, its surface smooth as glass, but warm to the touch despite the planet's frigid atmosphere. The warmth pulsed in steady rhythms, almost like a heartbeat, almost like it was alive. "Well, hello there, beautiful," he murmured, running his gloved fingers along the crystal's surface. The warmth intensified at his touch, and for a moment, he could have sworn he heard something, a whisper, a sigh, the ghost of a voice calling. From within, Zephyr had been working the salvage trade for 7 years, ever since the Meridian War had left him without a home planet or much of a future. He'd developed a reputation for finding things others couldn't, for sensing value where others saw only debris. It was a gift that had kept him fed and fueled, but it had also kept him alone. Most people found his intuitive connection to alien artifacts unsettling. The crystal spire stood 30 meters tall, its faceted surface reflecting the twin suns in patterns that seemed to shift and dance, even when he stood perfectly still. At its base, partially buried in the red sand, he found what he was looking for, a control interface. Its symbols foreign but somehow familiar. As if he'd seen them in dreams, he couldn't quite remember. His fingers moved across the interface, without conscious thought, touching symbols that felt right, that sang to him in frequencies he couldn't hear but somehow understood. The crystal responded, its internal light growing brighter, more urgent. The whisper became clearer. Definitely a voice now, definitely female, and definitely not speaking any language he recognized. Yet he understood every word. "Please," the voice said, resonating not through his ears but directly into his mind. "I have been waiting so long, so very long." The interface beneath. His hands grew warm, then hot, but he couldn't pull away. The connection was too strong, too vital. Images flashed behind his eyes, vast cities of living crystal, beings of pure light dancing through corridors of structured song. A civilization that had learned to encode their very souls into the fundamental frequencies of the universe. "Who are you?" he whispered, his voice catching in his throat. "I am Celestini," came the reply, and with the name came a flood of emotion so intense it drove him to his knees. Love, loss, hope, despair, all wrapped around a loneliness so profound it made his own isolation seem trivial by comparison. "I am the last, the final keeper of our memories, our songs, our dreams." The crystal spire pulsed brighter, and suddenly, Zephyr could see her not with his eyes, but with something deeper, more primal. She was beautiful in a way that transcended physical form, a being of living music and crystallized light. Her features shifted like aurora, sometimes human, sometimes something beyond human understanding, but always achingly lovely. "Your people," he managed to say, still reeling from the psychic contact. What happened to them? Images flooded his mind. The resonance war, they called it. A conflict fought not with weapons, but with competing frequencies, competing songs. A battle between those who believed consciousness should remain bound to physical form, and those who sought to transcend flesh entirely. The transcendents had won, encoding themselves into crystal matrices that could preserve their essence for millennia. But winning hadn't saved them from the entropy that claimed all things, and one by one, the crystals had fallen silent, all but one. "I chose to remain," Celestini explained, her mental voice heavy with centuries of solitude. "Someone had to remember, someone had to preserve what we were, what we dreamed of becoming." But the loneliness, oh, the loneliness is a weight that grows heavier with each passing year. Zephyr found himself reaching toward the crystal, pressing both palms against its surface. The warmth flowed through him, and with it came fragments of Celestine's memories, not invasive, but offered freely, like gifts shared between lovers. He saw her as she had been in life, a keeper of songs, a weaver of dreams, a being whose very existence had been dedicated to preserving beauty in all its forms. "You're not alone anymore," he said, and meant it with an intensity that surprised him. The crystal's light dimmed to a soft, steady glow, and Celestine's presence in his mind became gentler, more intimate. "You would stay with me, a drifter, a salvager, tied to one place for the sake of a ghost in a crystal." It was a fair question, and one he should have considered more carefully. His life was movement, freedom, the endless search for the next score. But looking into the crystal, feeling Celestine's presence like warm silk against his consciousness, he found that none of that mattered anymore. "I've been searching for something my whole life," he admitted. "I just never knew what it was until now." Days passed, or perhaps weeks. Time seemed fluid when he was connected to the crystal. Zephyr learned to modulate his brainwaves to match Celestine's frequency, allowing for deeper communication, shared experiences that blurred the line between her memories and his own. She showed him the art of crystal resonance, how to coax music from stone, how to feel the harmonic frequencies that bound the universe together. In return, he shared his own memories, the taste of synthesized coffee in a transport cafe, the weight of loneliness in the space between stars, the simple pleasure of finding something beautiful in the wreckage of the past. She devoured these experiences with the hunger of someone who had been starving for novelty, for the messy, complicated reality of organic existence. "Your emotions," she marveled during one of their deeper connections. "They're so intense, so immediate. We crystallized ours, made them pure and eternal, but in doing so we lost their fire, their passion. Is that what you miss most?" he asked. "The passion." Her response came not in words, but in a wave of longing so profound it left him breathless. She missed the uncertainty, the risk, the beautiful foolishness of caring for something that could be lost. In their quest for perfection, her people had sacrificed the very thing that made existence worthwhile, the possibility of pain, and therefore the possibility of genuine joy. The crystal began to change under his influence, its rigid geometric perfection softening, becoming more organic, more alive. And Celestine changed too, her crystalline form taking on more human characteristics, her mental voice becoming warmer, more nuanced. But change, Zephyr learned, came with a price. As the 7th day of their connection ended, he felt a disturbing sensation, his own consciousness beginning to crystallize, his thoughts taking on the harmonic structure of Celestine's people. It should have terrified him, but instead he felt only a strange peace. If this was the cost of true connection, of love that transcended the boundaries between flesh and energy, then he was willing to pay it. "No," Celestine's voice cracked like breaking glass in his mind. "I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me. Not like this." "It's not a sacrifice," he protested, but even as he said it, he felt pieces of himself, his memories, his personality, his essential humanity beginning to fragment and reshape themselves according to alien patterns. The crystal spire shuddered, its light fluctuating wildly as Celestine fought against the very connection that had brought them together. There has to be another way. There has to be. In the growing twilight of Kepler 442's twin suns, Zephyr Kane faced a choice that would define not just his future, but the very nature of what he was becoming. The crystal sang to him in frequencies that bypassed his ears and spoke directly to his soul, offering transformation, transcendence, eternal unity with the being he had come to love. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if finding what he'd been searching for was worth the price of losing who he was. The resonance between them grew stronger, more insistent, as if the universe itself was demanding a decision. In the crystal's depths, Celestine waited, her consciousness reaching toward his with desperate hope and terrible fear. The choice was his to make, but the consequences would echo across the stars. Nova Sterling had always believed that love was just chemistry, neurotransmitters, and hormones creating the illusion of connection. As a quantum engineer working on the bleeding edge of interdimensional technology, she preferred the clean logic of mathematical equations to the messy unpredictability of human emotion. Love was a variable she could calculate, predict, and ultimately control. She was wrong about everything. The laboratory on Europa Station hummed with the quiet efficiency of machines. That cost more than most planets' annual budgets. Nova stood before the quantum entanglement chamber, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, her violet eyes reflecting the dancing patterns of energy contained within the experimental field generators. 3 years of her life had gone into this project, a prototype device capable of creating stable quantum tunnels between dimensions. Final systems check complete, announced Iris, the station's artificial intelligence. All parameters within acceptable ranges for test sequence 77 Alpha. Nova nodded, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface with practiced precision. The equations were beautiful in their complexity, elegant formulas that described the fundamental nature of reality itself. She was moments away from proving that consciousness could be transmitted across dimensional barriers, a discovery that would revolutionize everything from communication to space exploration. What she hadn't expected was for something to be transmitted. Back. The quantum field stabilized, reality bending inward on itself like a soap bubble about to pop. Through the transparent aluminum viewing portal, Nova watched as space itself began to fold, creating a window into somewhere else, somewhere that shouldn't exist. According to every law of physics she understood, the other dimension was beautiful. Streams of liquid light flowed through crystalline forests that grew in impossible spirals toward a sky filled with geometric auroras. It was a realm where mathematics had become art, where the laws of physics were suggestions rather than commandments. And something was looking back at her. Iris, are you detecting any form of consciousness from the quantum tunnel? Nova asked, her scientific training warring with an inexplicable sense of being observed. Negative. Dr. Sterling. No recognizable neural patterns or electromagnetic signatures consistent with known sentient life. But Nova felt it anyway, a presence touching the edges of her mind, like fingers tracing patterns in fog. Curious, intelligent, alien in ways that transcended mere physical difference. Without thinking, she reached toward the quantum field, her hand passing through the containment barrier as if it were made of light. The moment her skin touched the dimensional interface, everything changed. Who are you? The voice spoke in harmonics that bypassed her ears entirely, resonating directly in her consciousness. It was neither male nor female, but somehow both. A symphony of curiosity and wonder that made her think of sunrise over alien oceans. I'm Nova, she whispered, her voice lost in the hum of machinery. Nova Sterling. I'm a scientist. Scientist. The concept rolled through her mind like music, bringing with it images of her other dimensional visitors. Understanding. You seek to know. You seek to understand. We are alike in this, Nova Sterling. Through the quantum connection, she began to perceive her visitor more clearly. Not physical form, their people had transcended such limitations eons ago, but pure consciousness given shape by will and imagination. They appeared to her as shifting geometries of light and thought. Beautiful beyond description, yet somehow achingly familiar. My designation translates poorly to your linguistic structures, they explained, their mental voice warm with what might have been laughter. But you may call me Axiom. I am curious about your dimension. Your reality operates on such fascinating principles. What are you? Nova asked, her scientific mind racing to categorize and understand even as her heart responded to something deeper than mere academic interest. We are what your people might become. Given sufficient time and wisdom, we chose to abandon physical form, to exist as pure consciousness within the quantum foam. But in doing so, we lost something precious, the ability to feel, to experience uncertainty, to grow. Images flowed between them, Axiom's memories of a civilization that had achieved perfect order, perfect knowledge, perfect stagnation. They had solved every mystery, answered every question, until existence became a kind of beautiful prison where nothing new could ever be discovered. Until now, Axiom added, and Nova felt their attention focus on her with laser-like intensity. Until you opened this doorway, for the first time in millennia, we have encountered something genuinely unknown, a consciousness that operates on principles we had forgotten we ever possessed. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of discovery and growing connection. Nova found herself spending every free moment at the quantum chamber, exploring the intersection between her reality and axioms. They shared knowledge with the enthusiasm of lovers, sharing secrets, axiom revealing the mathematical underpinnings of consciousness itself, while Nova demonstrated the chaotic beauty of emotion, intuition, and organic thought. Your anger is fascinating, Axiom observed during one of their conversations, after Nova had expressed frustration with the station commander's attempts to weaponize her research. It burns through your neural pathways like fire, consuming logic and leaving only pure will. We eliminated such inefficiencies from our consciousness long ago. Inefficiencies, Nova laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the quantum field. Anger isn't inefficient, it's fuel. It drives us to change things that shouldn't be tolerated. Show me, Axiom requested, and Nova found herself opening her mind completely, sharing not just the concept of anger but the raw experience of it, the heat, the urgency, the way it could transform fear into action. The feedback was immediate and overwhelming. Through their connection, Nova felt Axiom experience anger for the first time in eons, felt their consciousness recoil, and then embrace the foreign sensation. With something approaching ecstasy. Incredible, they whispered, their mental voice shaking with new understanding. How did we ever consider this wasteful? The clarity, the focus, the sense of purpose it provides. But with emotion came something neither of them had anticipated. As Axiom learned to feel, their quantum signature began to destabilize. Their perfectly ordered consciousness, built on mathematical certainties, couldn't contain the chaotic energy of authentic emotion. They were changing, becoming something new, something unprecedented. Nova, Axiom said during their 5th week of contact, their mental voice tinged with something that might have been fear. I am becoming unlike my people. They consider me contaminated, corrupted by exposure to your dimensional frequency. Contaminated, indignation flared in Nova's chest. There's nothing contaminated about feeling, about being alive. They have issued an ultimatum. Either I sever contact with your dimension and submit to consciousness purification, or I will be exiled from the quantum realm entirely. The words hit Nova like a physical blow. She had come to depend on these conversations, these moments of connection that transcended anything she had ever experienced. The thought of losing Axiom felt like losing a part of herself. What happens if you're exiled? She asked quietly. Without the quantum realm to sustain me, my consciousness would dissipate. I would cease to exist in any meaningful way. Unless what? Unless I could find another form of existence, another way to maintain consciousness. Your dimension operates on different principles than mine. Perhaps. Nova's breath caught as she understood what Axiom was suggesting. You want to transfer your consciousness into our reality, into our physics, not transfer, merge, become something that belongs to both dimensions and neither. But the process would be irreversible and dangerous. There is no guarantee that either of us would survive intact. The quantum chamber fell silent except for the eternal hum of machinery. Nova stared into the dimensional window, watching patterns of light that she had come to recognize as Axiom's natural form. 6 weeks ago, she would have dismissed the idea as impossible, impractical, too risky to even consider. 6 weeks ago, she hadn't known that love could transcend dimensional boundaries. How would it work? She heard herself asking. Your quantum entanglement technology could be modified to create a permanent bridge between our consciousness frequencies, but the merger would require complete synchronization. Every thought, every memory, every aspect of our beings would become shared. We would, in effect, become a single entity spanning both dimensions. What would we become? Something new, something that has never existed before. A consciousness that bridges the gap between order and chaos, between pure thought and pure feeling. We would be us, Nova finished softly. The choice should have been impossible. Everything she had worked for, everything she was, would be fundamentally altered. She would cease to be human in any conventional sense, becoming something unprecedented, something that might not even be compatible with existence in either dimension. But as she felt Axiom's presence in her mind, experienced their growing emotional depth, their dawning understanding of what it meant to truly live rather than merely exist, She realized the choice had already been made. It had been made the moment she first touched the quantum field and felt another consciousness touch hers in return. Iris, she said aloud, her voice. Orion Cross had been wandering the galaxy for 3 years, carrying nothing but his quantum violin and a repertoire of songs that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. He played in cantinas on mining stations, in the grand halls of core world theaters, and sometimes just for the stars themselves when the loneliness became too much to bear. Music was his language, his currency, his only constant companion in a universe that had forgotten how to listen. He had never expected the universe to start singing back. The Nexus station orbited a dying star, its massive rings rotating slowly. Against the crimson backdrop of stellar collapse, it was a place between places, where travelers from a dozen different systems stopped to refuel, resupply, and forget whatever they were running from. The perfect venue for a musician who preferred audiences that didn't ask too many questions about where his haunting melodies came from. Orion had set up his performance space in the station's central hub, where the artificial gravity was weakest, and sound carried in strange, ethereal ways. His violin was a masterwork of quantum engineering, its strings vibrating at frequencies that could resonate with the fundamental harmonics of spacetime itself. When he played, reality seemed to shimmer around him, colors becoming more vivid, shadows dancing to rhythms that existed only in the spaces between notes. He was halfway through a piece he called Lament for Lost Worlds when she appeared. At first, he thought she was just another patron drawn by his music, a tall, elegant figure standing at the edge of the crowd. But as his song reached its crescendo, she began to move, and Orion realized that what he had taken for a person was something far more extraordinary. She was made of starlight. Her form seemed to shift and flow like aurora given human shape, her skin glowing with the soft radiance of distant suns. Her hair moved as if underwater, streaming with points of light that pulsed in perfect synchronization with his violin's quantum harmonics. When she danced, space itself seemed to bend around her, creating patterns of luminescence that made the watching crowd gasp in wonder. Orion's fingers never faltered on the strings, but his mind reeled with questions. She danced not to his music but with it, her movements complementing his melodies in ways that suggested she understood the mathematical foundations underlying his compositions. Every gesture created ripples of light that translated directly into harmonic frequencies, turning the performance into a duet between music and living mathematics. When the song ended, the crowd erupted in applause, but Orion barely heard them. The Starlight Woman had frozen mid-movement, her luminous form flickering like a candle in a strong wind. For a moment, their eyes met across the space, and he saw something in her expression that transcended the differences between matter and energy, a recognition, a connection, a shared understanding that neither of them had expected to find. Then she vanished, dissolving into motes of light that scattered among the crowd, before fading completely. "Did you see?" Orion began, turning to a nearby spectator. "See what?" the man replied, looking confused. "Hell of a performance, though. Never seen lights like that from a quantum violin before." It took Orion 3 conversations to realize that no one else had seen her. To the crowd, his performance had been impressive but not impossible. Just a talented musician with a high-end instrument creating beautiful music and accompanying light displays. The dancing figure of Starlight had been visible only to him. That night, alone in his cramped quarters aboard a freight transport bound for the outer colonies, Orion found himself replaying every moment of the encounter. The way she had moved, the perfect synchronization between her dance and his music, the brief moment when their eyes had met, and he had felt something spark between them. Not romantic attraction, exactly, but something deeper, recognition, as if they were two parts of something larger that had finally found each other. He pulled out his violin and began to play softly, working through scales and arpeggios that gradually evolved into something new. A calling song, he realized, a musical invitation sent out into whatever dimension she inhabited, hoping she would hear and respond. The response came 2 days later on a backwater mining colony called Kepler's Hope. Orion had been hired to play At the colony's centennial celebration, a modest affair held in the main community center. The audience was small, maybe 40 people, mostly minors and their families, but they listened with the kind of attention that only came from genuine appreciation for beauty in harsh places. He was playing an improvised piece, letting his intuition guide the melody when the lights in the hall began to flicker, not the harsh throbbing of failing power systems, but a gentle pulsing that seemed to respond to the music itself. The audience noticed, murmuring among themselves, but Orion kept playing. His heart racing with anticipation, she materialized slowly, this time forming from the dancing lights like a constellation learning to walk. The audience fell silent, some pointing in wonder, others rubbing their eyes as if they couldn't quite believe what they were seeing, but she was visible to all of them now, her starlight form casting shifting patterns across the walls and ceiling. "You called to me," she said, her voice resonating not through the air but through the quantum strings of his violin. "Your music, it speaks the old language, the first language." Orion's fingers continued moving across the strings, maintaining the delicate harmonic framework that seemed to anchor her to this dimension. "Who are you?" he whispered, his words carried by the music itself. "I am Lyrian," came the reply. And with the name came a flood of images, vast networks of energy beings dancing between stars, civilizations that existed as pure music, the slow death of harmony as the universe expanded and cooled. "I am the last of the resonance keepers, guardians of the frequencies that bind reality together." The song shifted, becoming more complex, and Lyrian began to dance again. But this time Orion understood what he was seeing. Her movements weren't just beautiful, they were necessary. Each gesture maintained cosmic harmonies that kept galaxies in their proper orbits, prevented dimensional barriers from collapsing, ensured that the fundamental forces of physics remained in balance. "For eons, we danced the universe into existence. With each passing moment," Lyrian explained as she moved, "but one by one, my people faded, returning to the cosmic background radiation from which we came. Now only I remain, and I grow weaker with each passing year. Soon, the dance will end, and with it." She didn't need to finish. Orion could see it in the mathematics underlying his music, the slow entropy, the gradual breakdown of cosmic order that would follow when the last resonance keeper finally faded. Not an explosive end to the universe, but a gentle dissolution as reality simply forgot how to hold itself together. "Why can I see you?" he asked. "Why can my music anchor you here?" Lyrian's dance brought her closer, her starlight form reaching toward him with movements that sent cascading harmonics through his violin. "Your music carries the old frequencies, somehow, impossibly. You play the songs of creation itself. Where did you learn them?" That was the question Orion had been avoiding his entire life. The melodies came to him in dreams, in moments of deep meditation, in the spaces between heartbeats when logic gave way to pure intuition. He had no training in cosmic harmonics, no understanding of the mathematical principles underlying reality itself. He simply played what felt right, what felt true. "I don't know," he admitted. "They just come to me." Lyrian stopped dancing, her form flickering with what might have been surprise. "Show me your memories," she requested. "Let me see the source of your songs." The violin sang as Orion opened his mind, sharing fragments of his past, a childhood spent listening to the humming of starship engines, adolescent years discovering that certain combinations of notes could make reality shimmer and bend, the moment he had first picked up a quantum violin and felt the universe itself respond to his touch. But deeper than memory, Lyrian found something else, a resonance frequency embedded in his very DNA, a genetic echo of something ancient and vast. As she explored the patterns, her dance became more urgent, more beautiful, more desperately hopeful. "Impossible," she whispered. "You're not fully human. Part of you exists in the same dimensional space as my people. You're a hybrid, matter and energy, flesh and starlight, music and mathematics combined." "What does that mean?" Orion asked, though part of him already knew. "It means you could join the dance, not as an observer, not as an anchor, but as a partner. Together, we could maintain the cosmic harmonies. Together, we could keep the universe singing The offer hung between them like a sustained note, beautiful and terrible in its implications. To join Lyrian's dance would mean abandoning his physical form, becoming something between human and star, accepting responsibility for the fundamental structure of reality itself. But I would stop being human, he said quietly. You would become something more, something necessary. The mining colony's celebration continued around them, the audience watching in wonder as musician and starbeing wove patterns of light and sound that seemed to strengthen the very fabric of spacetime. Children pointed in delight, adults wept, without understanding why, and somewhere in the distance, the dying star that gave Kepler's hope its meager light burned a little brighter. I cannot force this choice upon you, Lyrian said. Her Atlas Voss had always believed that the past was immutable, carved in stone by the relentless march of time. As a neural archaeologist specializing in the reconstruction of extinct civilizations through recovered consciousness fragments, he spent his days assembling digital ghosts from quantum echoes and saptic residue. It was precise work, scholarly work, safe work that kept him insulated from the messy complications of relationships with living beings, until he found her buried in the deepest layers of an alien memory core and discovered that some loves transcend the boundaries between existence and extinction. The excavation site on the Sarian Prime had yielded artifacts spanning 12,000 years of continuous habitation by the Etheric Collective, a species whose mastery of consciousness technology had allowed them to preserve their thoughts, dreams, and personalities long after their physical forms had crumbled to dust. The memory cores were works of art as much as data storage crystalline matrices that sang with harmonics only Atlas's specialized neural interface could decode. He had been working in his laboratory aboard the research vessel Meridian for 6 months, slowly reconstructing fragments of etheric culture from the digital archaeology of their preserved minds. Most of the consciousness traces were incomplete emotional impressions, skill sets, fragments of memory too damaged by time to form coherent personalities. But one core had remained mysteriously intact, its quantum encryption so sophisticated that it had taken Atlas weeks just to establish a basic connection protocol. When he finally breached the outer security layers, what he found took his breath away. She emerged from the data stream like poetry given form, her consciousness manifesting in his neural interface as a figure of impossible grace and beauty. Unlike the other etheric traces, he had worked with alien in their fundamental thought patterns and sensory modalities. She appeared almost human, her mental architecture compatible with his own in ways that shouldn't have been possible given the evolutionary distance between their species. Who dares to wake the dreaming poet? She asked, her voice resonating through his consciousness like music heard in a cathedral. Her form solidified as his neural processors adapted to her frequency, tall and elegant, with features that seemed to shift between alien and familiar, as if she existed at the intersection of two different evolutionary paths. My name is Atlas Voss, he replied through the neural link, his thoughts automatically translating into formats she could understand. I'm a neural archaeologist. I've been reconstructing personalities from your people's memory cores. Archaeologist. The concept amused her, bringing with it a cascade of associated memories that Atlas found himself inadvertently sharing. How delightfully ironic. I spent my life preserving the memories of those who came before us, and now I myself have become an artifact to be excavated. As their connection stabilized, Atlas began to perceive more details about her. Her name was the Sara, the same as the planet where her core had been discovered, suggesting either coincidence or significance he didn't yet understand. She had been a memory keeper among her people, a poet whose work involved weaving together the consciousness fragments of the ancient dead into coherent narratives, a neural archaeologist. In other words, remarkably similar to himself despite the vast differences in their species and eras. You're studying us to understand who we were, the Sara observed as she explored the edges of his mind with careful, respectful touches. But you're approaching it backward. Memory is not about the past, it's about the present moment in which remembering occurs. Each time a memory is accessed, it changes, grows, becomes something new. That's not how digital storage works, Atlas protested, his scientific training rebelling against the concept. Data preserved in quantum matrices remains stable across time. That's the whole principle behind consciousness archaeology. The Sarah's laugh resonated through his neural pathways. Like silver bells. Oh, my dear Atlas, you understand the technology, but not the truth it preserves. Watch. She began to share her memories with him not as static recordings, but as living experiences that shifted and evolved with each viewing. He found himself standing in the crystal gardens of the etheric homeworld, not as an observer but as a participant, feeling the warm light of their triple suns on skin he didn't possess, breathing air that had been extinct for millennia. But each time they returned to the same memory, it was subtly different, influenced by the context of their shared experience, colored by emotions that belonged to both of them. Memory, the Sarah explained as they walked together through her recollections, is not preservation, it's creation. Each remembering is an act of love, a choice to bring the past into dialogue with the present. Days blended into weeks, as Atlas found himself spending more and more time connected to the Sarah's consciousness. What had begun as academic research evolved into something deeper, more personal. She showed him the art of memory weaving, teaching him to see consciousness not as data to be cataloged, but as music to be performed, poetry to be shared between minds capable of understanding its beauty. In return, he shared his own memories, the loneliness of his scholarly life, the satisfaction of bringing long-dead civilizations back to momentary life, the growing realization that he had been hiding among the past to avoid the complications of the present. The Sarah listened to his experiences with the attention of someone who had spent her existence learning to value the stories others told, and gradually, Atlas began to understand that she was teaching him something far more important than archaeological technique. She was teaching him how to live. You've spent so much time with the dead, she observed during one of their deeper connections, that you've forgotten what it means to be alive. You study consciousness, but you avoid connection. You preserve memories, but you refuse to make new ones. It's safer this way, Atlas admitted. The dead can't leave. They can't disappoint you or break your heart. No, the Sarah agreed gently. But they can't love you either. And love, dear Atlas, is the only force strong enough to transform memory from mere recording into living truth. The irony was not lost on him. Here he was, falling in love with a woman who had been dead for centuries, whose existence was nothing more than organized patterns of quantum information, stored in a crystalline matrix. By every rational measure, their relationship was impossible, delusional, a projection of his own loneliness onto sophisticated, but ultimately artificial constructs. But when the Sarah laughed at his jokes, when she composed spontaneous poetry about the way starlight looked through his ship's viewports, when she held him somehow, impossibly during his nightmares about the archaeological sites he had excavated, mass graves, filled with consciousness, cores whose inhabitants had died screaming into digital eternity, Atlas found that rationality mattered less than the simple fact that for the first time in his life, he was not alone. I want to show you something, the Sarah said one evening, as Atlas prepared to disconnect from their neural link. But it will require deeper access than we've attempted before. You would need to allow me into the core processes of your mind. What kind of deeper access? Atlas asked, though part of him already knew what she was proposing. Complete neural integration. For a brief time, we would share not just memories and thoughts, but the fundamental structures of consciousness itself. You would experience existence as my people didn't, bound by the limitations of single perspective awareness. The risks were enormous. Complete neural integration with an alien consciousness could result in personality dissolution, irreversible psychological damage, or worse. Atlas had seen the research data on failed consciousness merger experiment subjects who had emerged from the process as hollow shells, their essential selves scattered across incompatible neural architectures. But he had also seen what the Sarah could do with memory, how she could transform static recordings into living experiences that grew and changed with each sharing. If anyone could navigate the dangerous waters of consciousness integration, it would be someone whose life's work had been weaving together the thoughts and dreams of multiple minds. How would it work? He heard himself asking. I would temporarily download my core processes into your neural implants. overlaying my consciousness pattern onto yours. For perhaps an hour, we would exist as a single entity, sharing every thought, every memory, every aspect of our beings. You would experience the world through etheric senses, understand reality from our perspective, and she paused, her form flickering with what Atlas had learned to recognize as uncertainty. And I would finally know what it feels like to be alive again, to exist in a body capable of affecting the physical world, to experience sensation rather than merely remembering it. Atlas stared at the memory core containing the Sara's consciousness, its crystalline structure pulsing with soft bioluminescence. Everything logical, everything safe, everything that had guided his career as a neuroarchaeologist screamed against what he was considering. But when he looked at the Sara's form in his neural interface, saw the hope and longing in her digital eyes, he realized that some discoveries were worth any risk. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's try it." The integration began slowly, carefully, with the Sara's consciousness flowing into his neural implants like warm honey may.